Good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. On today's program, we will be talking with Tony Pucci. He's got a new book out, local author. It's a great mystery series, the Michael Bishop Mystery Series. If you've never read one, I highly recommend it. The new one is The Uninvited, so we'll be talking with him a little bit later on. What else we got? We got a lot to cover this morning, not just on the presidential race. I have a couple New York issues, which we may start with here in just a moment. We also, just a lot to cover. Let's just put it that way. I don't want to highlight too much in case I can't get to all of it. There's our contact information. Please feel free to reach out on the topics that we are discussing, or if you have any questions for Tony, that'd be great as well. Okay, I'm going to start with this because I found it kind of strange. We all know that inflation is bad. We all talk about, whoever you're talking to on the street, well, man, did you see how much eggs are at one point? Remember that was big, or milk, or whatever the case may be. And it seemed to be a really huge part of the conversation. I never expected what we're learning now, which is people are cutting back on the essentials. According to Bloomberg, Americans are cutting back on personal hygiene products, and it's a troubling sign for the U.S. economy. I would think so. Despite surging inflation, shoppers kept spending thanks to income gains and stimulus, of course. But those benefits are waning, and now Americans are skimping even on everyday items such as toilet paper and toothpaste. That is how bad inflation has become, and it also explains a lot, by the way. Wow, this is shocking to me. Personal hygiene products, including staples, have taken a hit. According to NIQ, which tracks these types of purchases, units sold of toothpaste, laundry detergent, and toilet paper are down around 3% to 4% in the 52 weeks through June the 24th. Now, it says here, to be sure, some products are being used less at home as Americans return to work and travel. That doesn't really explain it. If you're returning to work, it seems like numbers would be up on personal hygiene products. But not just a troubling sign, not to start with the negative news, but we all already know what inflation is doing to all of us when we go to the gas pump, when we go to the grocery store. Let me ask you the question. I put up the contact information, the numbers on the bottom of the screen. Have things become so bad and so costly that you've had to skip on essentials? I think it's a fair question to ask. I know the media very, very often is trying to sugarcoat the economy and where we are at. So when I saw those numbers, it was kind of startling to see just how bad things are becoming. Now, when we come back, I'm not going to focus on that the whole time. I just saw that this morning, and I thought I'd bring it to you before we ran out of time because of other issues. We do have, I want to start with anyway, a story about public safety in New York. I know this is a common theme that we talk about on the program, but according to new polls, it's something that we've been saying over and over again, that New Yorkers are genuinely scared for public safety. It's not something that we just keep pushing, or maybe your bubble of people keep pushing. It is a very real concern, not just for the people in the city, but in all of New York. So when we come back, I'm going to talk about that. Again, contact information right there if you have anything you'd like to weigh in on this morning. And as I said, Tony Pucci will be our guest in just a little bit, so stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. So I mentioned before the break, the polling has proven yet again the concern that we as New Yorkers have for our public safety. Now, a lot of it comes from bail reform and a lot of other general issues. Hold on, our guest is here, but I want to put this up on the screen. 1 second here. All right. Let me unlock the door for our guest. There we go. So that is the polling there. We're going to talk about it in depth here in just a little bit, but I want to get right to Tony. Tony, you can sit down right over there if you want. But this is coming from the New York Post. 41% of New Yorkers have never been this concerned about their public safety. This goes back to a topic that we've discussed numerous times, why Lee Zeldin did better than expected. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Let me take another short break, and we'll be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and this is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program. We are being joined by Tony Pucci. Tony, thanks so much for being on the program.
Well, thank you for having me, Frank.
I'm having flashbacks to the old radio days.
Oh, I know it. You know, and I look at that sign on air, and I just want to say I'm glad that you are back on the air.
Tony. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm glad that you're still writing books. Did you plan on writing this many?
No, not at all.
Yeah, I think when we first started talking about the books, you only had a few in store, right? You were only going to do a couple.
Well, you know, when I did the first one, it was a sort of a surprise to me.
Yeah.
And I didn't think I'd be able to do another one.
Yeah.
And then I did.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's it. And then I did another one, and this is now the 8th one.
That's wild.
And I would say maybe there'll be another one.
I was wondering.
You know, but I'll put certainly a little time in between.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it usually takes about 6 months to write a book, for me anyway. Yeah. And it's nice to take a break from that.
Sure.
You know, I have really no preconceived notion of how the books are going to evolve.
Yeah.
And that's part of the fun for me as well.
Well, and you know I love the Michael Bishop series, and I've talked about it with you in the past, but for those who aren't familiar with it, tell us a little bit about Michael Bishop and where this idea came from.
Well, Michael Bishop is an English teacher in a high school. He's been there for a long time, and of course there are some echoes there to my own experience. Sure. You know, I taught school for 43 years, and you know, I always told the students to write about what you know.
Right.
And so when I started doing mystery novels, I made the amateur detective an English teacher. And of course, he's come across all kinds of situations, and he's met all kinds of different people, both on the staff, the faculty, administration, students. And that gives him you know, a basis for making the investigations that he does.
That's one of the things I love about the book, because it always seems that there's some character you can relate to, or you can kind of put an image in your head of someone that you know. I think that's what's drawn me to the book. I will say, though, this fictional school is based out of, I would not go there. There seems to be a lot of trouble just about once a year.
Too many people that are dying.
Yes, exactly. So tell us about the new book, The Uninvited.
Well, you know, the books can be read independently.
Yeah.
But they are, in a sense, a series. And they sort of build on each other. Of course, there are some central characters who are going to be in all of the books. Sure. Michael Bishop and some of the colleagues. Some interesting things happen to some colleagues along the way. And then there are always new characters coming into the stories. But this novel in particular focuses on another tragedy that happens at the school. And unfortunately, 2 of the main suspects happen to be 2 of his closest friends. One being Ron Jennings, who's now the principal of the school, and the other is this lovely young lady who is sort of a Kate Upton look-alike.
So that'll give you a picture to look at when you're reading it.
Who is the assistant principal of the school, and they become suspects, and he has to sort of work through that, as well as working through some other personal issues. There are always, in these books, sort of 2 different threads of stories that are going on, and they sort of merge together at some point. So he has his own issues to deal with as he's dealing with the crime that he's trying to help the authorities solve.
Well, I haven't read it yet. I have it right here because I normally I go through it about 2 days because I love it, and so I said I better not because then I'll ask you all these specific questions because after the last book I didn't know how you were going to take it, like I mean where the storyline is going to go. So I'm really excited to look at this one. I don't want to give anything away, of course, but last one had a lot of twists and turns.
It did, and you know, there was a point where I thought, well, maybe that should be the end of it.
Right.
You know,
I kind of wondered if it would be.
Exactly, and other people did as well. But then I thought, well, I think I can continue this story.
Well, because it was such a stress factor. Again, not to give anything away, but a stress factor in every book. So it'll be interesting to see what the new stress factor is, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So where do you get your ideas from? Is it just something you say, okay, I'm ready to start writing a new book, and just start thinking?
I start with very little knowledge.
Yeah.
And I don't plot the books out as some writers do. It's just not the way it worked for me. I just start with a basic idea of something happening. You know, the incident that happens fairly quickly in the book. And then I start, you know, building in suspects and trying to, you know, create suspense. You know, you want to keep turning the pages and adding twists and turns. And of course, people don't always tell the truth when you're trying to get information.
Right.
And so he has to try to sort all that out. And he has... You know, he's an older man, and he has some memory issues,
right,
which I think we can relate to.
And that plays a part in it very often.
Yes, yes. That he's often on the verge of figuring something out, but he can't quite put all the pieces together. He's forgotten something. He's missed a little something, which is very human. And then all of a sudden, there's this, you know, a light dawns on Marblehead. Right. And he gets it, and then there's usually a dramatic scene where he confronts the killer, and you know, I think they're stories that people can relate to pretty easily. There's not violence, there's not you know, there's not bad language in there. They're just enjoyable reads, just to escape. Get away from everyday issues and just immerse yourself in the book. There are many chapters, and then the chapters have little divisions, and so it's easy to sort of pick it up and put it down, and then be able to continue on.
One of the things I like is as I'm reading it, you know, you'll throw somebody off by suggesting that this could be the suspect, you know, or this person, that's questionable. So you end up really questioning everybody at some point during the book. Not Michael Bishop, but like, but pretty much, at least not yet. I haven't read the new book, but there's always some. Well, was it this person? Was it that? And you know, that kind of keeps you hooked even when the actual mystery itself isn't building up.
Well, you know, one of the reasons that happens is that I haven't entirely decided who's going to be the murderer myself. Yeah. And so I build in explanations that would validate that person being the one, or that person being the one, and then at some point, obviously, I have to decide.
Yes. Is that difficult?
Well, you know, when you go back to the seventh book, it was quite difficult to make that decision.
Yeah. So what is the most difficult part of writing a book like this?
Well, I guess it's just being faithful to it. I try to write every day. Okay. At least a couple hundred words, and just to keep it moving. I mean, if I were to stop, then I'd kind of lose the flow of things, so it's just more the discipline of sticking with it. Sometimes even when you're not sure exactly where you're going. You know, sometimes people will say, you know, where are these characters coming from? They're, I think, relatable people.
I do too.
Even though they're not real people.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's fiction. And the the idea of human nature, just as in the literature that I taught for many years, you learn a lot about people and their motivations and the secrets of the human heart.
Of course.
And that's really one of the reasons that I go back to it, that I keep going back to it, is because there are endless stories. I mean, every person is so unique and so interesting.
Where do you, because very often you reference books and other literature in your book. Where is that from? Classes that you taught? Is that what you're currently reading? Like in the last book, you mentioned One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest quite a bit. Is that because you were reading it at that time, or just a favorite book, or how does that work?
It's a book that I've taught.
Okay.
And actually, some of the scenes, as you know, some of the scenes in the novel are classroom scenes where Michael Bishop is talking to the students. And a lot of the times, the works that are referenced are works that I've taught, but also they're not just fillers. The discussion that connects to the literature actually connects to the book.
Okay.
I mean, when you stop to think about it, you'll see that there are some connections. It's not just, oh, let me talk about Moby Dick or something. There's a reason why I'm pulling some theme together, or some character trait or something.
And it seems like a character will learn. I mean, almost Michael Bishop will learn with the book sometimes. Does that make sense? You know, kind of get a better idea of who the... Anyway, I'm going to fall into these deep questions, and I don't want to do that. So let me take a short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and this is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program, because we're talking with Tony Pucci about the new book, The Uninvited, a Michael Bishop mystery. So you had mentioned earlier, they can be standalone books, because you mentioned this is the 8th one. Someone doesn't have to pick up at number 1 if they don't want. I'd recommend it. But if you recall, when I first started reading the books, I went out of order. And it didn't really, it affected a little bit, but not really enough to tell me who the ultimate murderer was or something like that.
Right. The first book is called Outline for Murder, and obviously, if you read just that one, you'd be fine. One of the more popular books actually is the 4th book, which is Murder on the Marginal Way. Yeah. And part of that, the reason there is that one is not based in upstate New York.
Right.
That Marginal Way is in Ogunquit, Maine. And Michael Bishop is on vacation, and of course he bumps into a former student, which happens to me a lot. Yeah. And then of course the mystery takes place there. And because of the title, and a lot of people have been to Ogunquit, Maine, recognize the Marginal Way. They buy it purely on the basis of the title. Okay. And of course that works, you know. But there is a development, just as there would be a development in any situation as you get to know someone over the years. They learn more about themselves, you learn more about them. They grow and they change, and they become friends.
Yeah. Well, and I think you kind of become friends with the characters yourself, because like as I read, like you said, I'm thinking about the early ones, and to today, you know a lot more about Michael Bishop. Michael Bishop hasn't changed necessarily, but it's a deeper character. Does that make sense? I guess you understand a little bit more. I shouldn't be trying to dive deep to an old teacher, because you're probably saying that didn't even make sense. I would have just given Frank a D on that. But do you reread the books just to refresh your memory before you write a new one?
I did reread the 7th book before I started the 8th book, because there was such a gap in between. Actually, in between, I had written a nonfiction book Twin Tiers Legends.
Oh, okay.
Remembering Coach D, remembering Joel Stevens and Coach D. Coach D is Mike DeLuizio,
Of course.
who was the football coach at Notre Dame High School for many years and a very close friend of mine. And about 25 years ago, I had helped him write a book about Joel Stevens, who was a wonderful athlete who was unfortunately victim of cancer at the age of 22. And he wrote this book, 5C Hero. And he continued to tell Joel Stevens' inspiring story over the years. And Mike had decided there were so many reactions, so many positive reactions to the story, that he wanted to keep that alive, and he wanted to write another book. So I said, yeah, I'll help you. Let's do it. And so he started doing that, and unfortunately he developed ALS. And he struggled through it, and I was working with him on the book, and you know, he wasn't able to finish it, and I promised him that I would do it. And so I finished writing the segment on Joel Stevens, and then I turned the second half of the book into a tribute to Mike himself, who was an extraordinary person and someone who had a tremendous impact on many young people over the years that I was witness to. And so that took me away from Michael Bishop for a while. And so I did have to go back and reread because I wanted there to be certainly some continuity.
Right. And there was so much going on in the last book that you didn't want to overlook something, I would say, right?
Right. Well, and you know, part of it is being careful about ages of characters and the dates. You know, how many years has he been teaching? How old is Lulu Pitts?
Right.
You know, some of those things that I just, like Michael Bishop, I don't remember. You know, so I have to go back and read. And I'm sure there are probably some of my former students would be very anxious to find those discrepancies.
Does anybody ever come up to you and say, "I know that character is based on me"?
Someone mentioned a character that was in the book, sort of a minor character that was in a book, and said, "That's so-and-so."
Yeah.
And it had never occurred to me. In my wildest dreams, it had not occurred to me. But once that person said that, I could see what they were thinking, but had absolutely no intention of doing that. Yeah.
Do you...
As a matter of fact, just to add a little bit to that, the first mystery that came out, Outline for Murder, the victim was the football coach,
right?
And he was not a very nice person. No. And Mike DeLuizio was the football coach, and he was saying, "Am I the coach?" and I said, "No, Mike, not at all," because he was totally different from that character. And so that relates to that.
Well, that's why I wonder, because you know, you see these characters and people that had you as a teacher or that worked with you. I just wonder if they go home at night and read it and go, "Wait a minute."
They might be looking to see if they're in there.
Yeah, right. That's very funny. So we're talking about The Uninvited, a Michael Bishop mystery that is out now. Do you have a favorite character other than Michael Bishop?
I would say Ron Jennings.
Yeah.
Ron Jennings, because they have been working together from the beginning. At the beginning, Ron Jennings was the assistant principal. He's had his issues in the books. He's currently the principal of the school. They're very good friends, and so I would say that would be one character. That's one character I don't plan on killing off.
Okay, good. Now we know. So I can read this one. Yes, 'cause I like his character too, because the two, I almost said you, but Michael Bishop works together so well with the character. You know, they're both looking out for each other in a way. And I think Lulu adds that a little bit to it now in a newer way.
Right.
But they all seem to be sticking up for each other, right?
Yeah.
But maybe not in this one. Should I not say anything? I don't know.
Well, and the thing about Lulu Pitts is that her mother is a former Notre Dame student.
Yeah.
No,
No.
Notre Dame student. Well, there I go.
Yeah,
making
see,
that
I calling you
connection.
Michael Bishop.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Well, you spend a lot of time there, and that's
Oh, of course.
that's what you think of. But it's Holy Trinity High School, where she now is the assistant principal, and her mother had gone to that school many
Right.
years ago, and I don't want to give away too
Right,
much, but the mother of Lulu Pitts becomes a character, recurring character
Right.
in the stories.
So before we go, are you working on the next book or no?
Not at all.
No. When did you finish this? You must have just finished this.
Just finished
Oh,
it.
okay.
It's just out a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
So I'm taking a nice break.
Okay.
And really, when you look at the history of the books, it's about one a year.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So I'm good for 2023. So sometime in 2024.
How would and during COVID, did you write more, or was it on the same pace?
No, it's about the same pace.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I couldn't remember the time frame, because I know we've interviewed a few people that have also just recently put out books, and it seemed like they got their most work done when we were all in lockdown. So I couldn't remember if you did more.
Well, for me, I've been on lockdown since I
Oh.
retired.
Okay, well, there you go. That's funny. So you're not working on the next, but where can we buy, before we go, where can we buy this book?
Well, it's on Amazon.
Okay.
And they're available as a paperback, obviously, and
Actually,
they're ebooks.
Yeah. Oh, and
as
there
well.
are ebooks.
They're
Okay.
ebooks as well.
There's a
And I also have signed copies of the books at Millport Landing,
I thought
which
so.
is on Route 14 in Millport, and so that's another way of getting the books.
Well, Tony, thanks so much for being on the program this morning. You're going to have to write one quicker so I can have you back on soon. Does that sound good?
Well, thank you very much for
And you got to
having
make
me,
a
Frank.
deal. You got to come out with one where the TV talk show host is the murderer. Okay? Not really. Don't please don't do that, actually. All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Thank you again, Tony Pucci, for being our guest. The new book, The Uninvited. I know I get a little fanish there because I very much enjoy the books, and I'm not just saying that because Tony's not in here anymore, so I'm not just saying it because he was here. They are really, like he said, they're an easy book to read. There's not, it doesn't get too complicated. You feel like you're doing homework. It's just fun. It's like watching a television show in a way, but if you're a reader, you'll really enjoy it. Take my word for it. So the Michael Bishop series, and you'll watch the characters grow through each book. 8 books. That's amazing. I used to have them on in the radio days, and it was always a lot of fun to talk about the books. I can't believe it's been 8 already. Okay. Before Tony came in, we were talking about this article. I want to get back to it because it doesn't come as a surprise necessarily, but 41% of New Yorkers have never been this concerned about their safety. Crime is on the top of the mind for most New Yorkers, as a majority are concerned that they'll soon be a victim. How terrifying is that? And then, yeah, we're told that bail reform is nothing to be concerned about. And then Governor Hochul has really the audacity to go around and say, well, we made changes. We talked about it yesterday. They're not changes. I mean, they're minute. When people are this concerned, people in Albany should take notice, and that goes back to why Governor Hochul is giving these kind of press release type tours of, see, we are trying, hoping that you're not paying attention and realizing there's no teeth to what she did. A combined 61% of Empire State residents admitted that they're either very concerned, that's 21%, or somewhat, 40%, concerned that they'll be the next victim of a crime, according to a new Siena College poll. Now, it's even bigger in the city, but this is all of New York, just so you know. 87% of New Yorkers think crime is either a very or somewhat serious problem, while just 11% said it's not an issue, not something they're concerned with. 87%. And what do we see in Albany? We see different ideas to make matters worse. Clean Slate Act. Oh boy, you get frustrated when you think about all the changes they made to, again, and I've said it a million times, but to coddle the criminals and tie the hands of the police. Now, I don't want to keep reading numbers because I know that gets a little bit annoying, but But when you look at what people are doing to protect themselves in the state, 40% of citizens spent over $100 on goods or services to make them feel safer or more protected from crime. That's just within the last 12 months. 34% bought home security cameras or got ones that are managed by a professional firm. So, and this goes against all demographics too, folks. There's no specific group that is concerned about the crime. All demographics. Is this the worst it's ever been? They ask. 41% of all New Yorkers, with little variation across most demographic groups, say they've never been more worried about their personal safety. And what are we doing about it? Again, no real changes to bail reform, nothing of substance. Albany is not taking it serious. I thought Governor Hochul would do a better job with it. Yeah, she came out the other day and said, I held up the budget just for this issue. Again, it's not going to make any real change. But I thought after Zeldin's really great showing, I know he didn't win, but when you look at how good of a job he did and really won Republicans the House because of his campaigning, going around helping secure the majority in the House for Republicans because of the seats we got because of that campaigning. Lee Zeldin ran first and foremost on public safety. Governor Hochul didn't recognize that until much later because of that shady character she had telling her that she had to focus on, I believe it was abortion. So I thought for sure a smart politician would. I think you're actually seeing from former, now disgraced Governor Andrew Cuomo, when he does these podcasts, he's even talking about public safety. So I think he recognizes the opportunity, because I'm still not convinced he's not going to run for something, but he recognizes the opportunity of campaigning and talking about public safety. So why is Governor Hochul, she is, again, kind of misleading everybody into thinking she's doing something, but why are those in Albany? Is it because they're in their own bubble and they're most likely safe, they think, in their district? Why are they not doing more? So that's the big question. I'm going to put that question up for you. Do you feel less safe in New York? Are you a part of that percentage that are concerned about their safety? Because it's not just affecting the city. It's not just affecting big urban areas. It's affecting us in small towns throughout upstate New York. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some presidential issues. Again, I'll see if we have any comments. I'll try to read those a little bit later on, so please reach out to me. Right now, we've got to take that short break, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Got that a little loud. I'm having a little trouble with my audio there. There we go. Okay. We're just talking about got to be careful on some of the angles that we put up here on the screen when it comes to the street. Well, we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Why is the White House, and President Biden did this the other day, why are we telegraphing to, you name it, to any of our adversaries that we're running short on ammunition? We heard it from the president. There was a lot of backlash. Why are you talking about that? Now the White House confirming it on yesterday's broadcast on CNN this morning, saying, and this is Chief White House Correspondent Phil Mangley says, there have been kind of two rationale for it. One is the fight that the Ukrainians are now in, where Russia are very dug in across the front lines. These would be a helpful defense capability to have. The other is purely running out of the defense industrial issues that the U.S. and its allies are having. Which is it? Is there an explanation? So, John Kirby, the White House National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, said, well, it's actually both. But this is the crux of why I bring it up. But the prime driver right now is the inventory issue. I don't understand why, you know, you're looking at a situation of, well, what if China decides, you know, the Taiwan issue, and we're again telegraphing and saying we don't have ammunition that's needed. I really don't understand it, and that's Michael Goodwin. I got to be careful because the headline uses some choice language. But Michael Goodwin at the New York Post says Barack Obama was right to be wary of Joe Biden's ability to, we'll say, mess things up. If you recall that very famous quote from former President Barack Obama to another Democrat that, never underestimate Joe's ability to mess things up. Essentially, you get the gist of what he said. There's a very lengthy piece, we've talked about it before, but Joe Biden has been on nearly the wrong side of history nearly every time when it comes to foreign policy. So he goes through and talks about, Michael Goodwin, about how many times the president has screwed up when it comes specifically to Ukraine. And one of the things I didn't realize is how much we're spending, and the president seems to have no problem not knowing exactly where that money's going. He said that it was too premature, which I would agree, I guess, with NATO. But again, that was something they were going to have at the discussions at that NATO conference, and yet said it's too early to have Ukraine join NATO. And again, in fairness, he's right, but isn't that a part of what I don't know. But back in February, Niall Ferguson said, he called it a strategic error. He said that Washington failed to realize that China is the bigger beneficiary of the aid to Ukraine, and added, all the tough talk about defending Taiwan is from an alternative reality. And so, as Michael Goodwin said, just 5 months later, Biden publicly concedes that point, that the U.S. is low on ammunition. If Ferguson could see this moment coming, why couldn't the president? So you can find that full article for yourself at the New York Post. The president did skip, I probably have to take a break, don't I? But the president did skip that NATO dinner. The White House said his workload's been just too much. It's been way too heavy of a workload. But yet he was just on the beach a couple days ago. It's confusing. It's not just to criticize him, but I read something earlier today that I thought was a good point. It's not if you go to this dinner, it's not really anything that important. It's a lot of pomp and circumstance, but it's very noticeable when someone doesn't go. So you don't really get a lot away from going to the dinner, but if you don't go, it speaks volumes. So I don't know. He hit the beach earlier this weekend on Saturday, July 8th. Now the workload is too much, and he skips the NATO dinner. We're going to have to rush through a lot because I still have a lot to cover, and we are nearly out of time. So stay with us. We'll be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Just before we wrap up, another good piece, if you want to find it at the New York Post. Disgraceful defenders of Biden's casual cruelty to his staff. An article we brought to you yesterday from Axios, which is getting some attention, is that Biden has created somewhat of a toxic work environment. You can find that piece for yourself at the New York Post. All right, so Trump is unlikely to participate in the first two GOP presidential debates, is what his longtime advisor Jason Miller has said. Essentially saying we don't see the point in it, or he didn't. Now, he made it clear that Trump has not made up his mind yet, but not seeing an upside if he's in it with people pulling way lower than him. It really wouldn't make much sense for him to go and debate right now with a bunch of folks who are down at 3, 4, and 5%. Even Governor DeSantis, who's the second-place candidate in the race currently, is at least 20, 30, or 40 points behind, Miller said. So ultimately, President Trump will make a decision as we get closer. He has not said anything definitive one way or the other. I'm not expecting him to participate, though. So again, not official word, but speculated that he will not. Now, Ron DeSantis was asked yesterday by NBC if he would be Trump's running mate. I thought that passed. Yes, I thought that had passed. I thought it was both almost mutually agreed upon that would not be the case. And DeSantis suggesting that. I don't think so. I'm not a number 2 guy, he said. Saying he would rather stay on as governor because the vice presidency doesn't really have any authority. And then they said, well, have you thought of a running mate? And he said, it's a little bit presumptuous of me to be doing that at this stage. I'm here to win the early primaries, and that's what we've got to do first. Bethany Mandel talks about the attacks on Governor DeSantis' wife, calling it misogynistic, these attacks of calling her Karen. That's another piece that we just don't have time to get to, but I would highly recommend it. That's at the New York Post as well. Basically saying in the pieces, because she's concerned about her children, that Casey DeSantis is labeled this, I think, I don't know, overused term, but something that is thrown around a lot, this Karen, I don't know, name calling. MSNBC calling Casey America's Karen. What Miss Mandel suggests is what we need more Karens that are willing to fight for their kids and their education, and that's going back to, of course, we've seen the all-out attack on parents having a say in their child's education. We are out of time. I felt like we had so much this morning, so many things to talk about, and I think we got to most of them. I want to thank Tony Pucci for being on the program. The new book, The Uninvited, check that out for yourself. You can buy it at Amazon. I really think you will like them. I'm not just saying that. I think you'll have a fun time reading those books. I would start from the first one, but if you can't, just get the new one. It won't bother you that much. All right, join us tomorrow morning starting at 7 a.m. for Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Have a great day, everyone, and we will see you bright and early tomorrow morning.